Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Business Spotlight podcast, where we shine a light on the incredible entrepreneurs and business leaders in our community. I'm your host, Craig Whipperman with Music City Action Coach, and today we're excited to introduce to you someone who is blazing a trail in custom metal fabrication here in Nashville. Our guest today is Derek Wolfe, CEO at Wolfe Industrial. We'll dive into Derek's background, explore the challenges he's faced, and the successes he's celebrated. Whether you're a fellow entrepreneur, an aspiring business owner, or someone who simply loves to support local businesses, this conversation is sure to inspire and inform. So without further ado, let's welcome Derek to the podcast. Derek, how you doing today?
I'm great, Craig. Thanks for asking.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about Wolfe Industrial and how you got to where you're at.
Well, first, Craig, thanks for having me on. I'm 45-year-old, married father of three beautiful girls. I love health and fitness and learning, and personal growth is important to me. My journey here started in high school, where the first job I had was cleaning bathrooms and sweeping, loading trucks. And so since then, I've worked in nearly every position here at Wolfe, which has been a great opportunity to learn all the areas of this business.
So you started literally at the bottom.
I did, and I was okay with that. At the time, I mean, I was 16 years old, and so I just did what was asked of me. And it's dirty, hot, nasty work that we do here, and I seemed to be okay with that at the time.
Yeah, awesome. And so, if you don't mind me asking, how long ago was that?
That was in the late 90s.
Late 90s.
Late
Yeah.
90s, yes. And
Awesome.
so I went to MTSU and got a business degree, and then came back to work, continued to work in the field and in fabrication, learning the trade for many years, and then finally made it into the office in my late 20s, at which point I was an estimator. But I worked as a purchasing manager for a little while he was out, and then slowly my grandfather, who had started the company in '79, passed away in 2012, and a little bit after that, I began getting into operations, simply because as a family business, we operated that way for a very long time, which is basically there's no bureaucracy or no red tape in family businesses, and we needed some. And so the first issue we had was communication errors in manpower. And people would say, "Oh, I requested this project to be manned and it didn't get manned. I told you about it. What happened?" And so I said, "Oh, well, from now on, we're going to fill out a form, and then we're going to email that form so there's documentation and a record of it." So that was kind of there was a need. And so I then created the form for that need. And that was what kind of got me into operations. And then shortly after that, I got the title of operations manager.
Fantastic. So yeah, systems in any business is important, but I would imagine in manufacturing, I don't know how you can do it without having some systems in place. Sounds like in the beginning, you guys are kind of a little ad hoc. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so now we're really trying to keep that family business feel, but also bring in some of that red tape and bureaucracy that a corporation provides to keep up guardrails. Things used to be kind of like a handshake around here, and people took advantage of that. And so you have people that are working really hard, and they're seeing other people that are mediocre, and it's really not a good culture, because mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. That's Nick Saban, if anybody's
Yeah, right. I've heard him say that.
that is real. That was going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a culture like that, it seems like sounds like there was not really a lot of accountability either. If you didn't.
That's correct. That's yes, and we operated on if someone got out of line, they would be called on the carpet and they would get their butt chewed. And then they would go off, and then in 6 months they would be doing the same thing again. And so when I became operations manager, I'll never forget the first person I wrote up. This guy was probably 10 years my senior. And we were sitting in the room with documentation, and I was asking him to sign this piece of paper, acknowledging that he's being written up. And he just kept looking at me going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he was just flabbergasted that someone was actually taking it one step further, which is what we really needed at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No
And
question.
and that's when behavior starts to change, is when people are really held accountable. When they sign a piece of paper that says, "I know that I did wrong," that's when change happens.
Yeah, exactly. So important to have guardrails, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable behavior, but then specifically what kind of performance is expected of me and what are my KPIs and all of that so that it's clearly understood, and everybody's on the same page. So yeah, you can step into a role like that and see some obvious things. How long did you stay into the operations role before you moved on to the next one?
I maybe 7 years
Hmm.
before I was put in the CEO role, which is when my uncle retired.
Hmm.
And then 1 year in that role until my father retired, and now president CEO. So it was a pretty quick transition from operations manager to owner.
Wow. So that's all happened pretty recently then.
Yes, my father retired at the end of 2024, and my uncle retired at the end of 2023. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind for sure. I
Yeah, I'm
mean,
sure. Are they still involved in the business?
no, they're retired and living their best life.
Awesome. Awesome. So, when you stepped into the operations role, you saw some things that needed to be changed. Was it so obvious when you stepped into the new role here, or have you put your stamp on things or had a different view or perspective?
Yes, one of the first things I did when I moved into the owner role was readjust our organizational chart. Uh,
Hmm.
Through those couple years that I was operations manager to CEO, I had all of a sudden had 11 direct reports. And if anybody knows, 11 direct reports is just too many when all those direct reports are in different departments as well. So I wasn't doing a very good job um, collectively managing all of those groups. So one of my objectives was to introduce a new organizational chart that reduced those direct reports to no more than 5 for anyone. And now I have 2 direct reports now that answer to me. So now things are getting done on a much quicker schedule, and in much more detail, where I could not get into the weeds as much. So it's funny, as I've been delegating out, people are doing a better job than I did, and that's exciting to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's a little bit. Let me ask you, how's it feel to step out of that role of being the expert? And I mean, did you have any hesitation about doing it, or were you all in? Here, it's yours. How did you address that?
That's a good question. We, through the succession planning, through these retirements, we hired a man named Greg Lewis, and I attribute a lot of my newer thinking to Greg. And one of the first things he said to me was, "You want to be able to work on the business, not work in the business." And so that's really what I try to do is try to work at a 30,000 foot level and not get so trapped up in the weeds. And I have a very good team here, so I had people that I trusted that have been worked here for a very long time, and I knew that they were capable. Now they didn't know that they were capable, and I had to give them a little bit of a push.
Mhm.
But everyone has done a great job, and without the team, without me trusting in them and letting them be autonomous in their roles, I think that we would not be as far along as we are.
Yeah, awesome. So, how has the culture changed over the last couple of years with your dad and uncle stepping out and you stepping in? So you've touched on it a little bit here, but maybe describe it a little bit more.
Yeah, I my hope is that the culture has become more of like a team as opposed to a family business. I read recently that a team or a family business wants to make you feel safe, where a team wants you to be better. And that's really my focus, is to make everyone better here. And so that way we can all move forward together. Again, like we were talking about earlier, where the mediocre despise high performers and vice versa. I'd like to create a team here of high performers.
Mhm.
And so in order to do that, we've had to bring in data and more reporting. And so there has been some reluctance of that and some pushback on that data and reporting. For example, we had an issue with non-billable hours where people were just putting things on shop when they could go to a job that needed to be charged out. And so we have a report now for chargeability, and so we monitor that much closer. And then we make sure that people are being productive. And if they're not being productive, we move them into a better role where they can be more productive. And so we've really eliminated a ton of waste just by focusing in on an area that had not been looked at before, simply because we didn't have the right reporting.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And so, when somebody new steps into a role and they, they just have a different perspective on things and they see things a little bit differently, and it's no surprise that things like that would get uncovered or noticed,
Mhm.
the new set of eyes. And it's always great to have someone, with a different perspective, point things out. So yeah, congrats, man, on your transition. Sounds like things are going well.
It is going well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. So what's the next 3 to 5 years? What's your vision for Wolf Industrial here?
Well, our focus is food and beverage, but we work in a lot of different industries. My focus is to continue to grow the business organically. We have a lot of capacity here that we can manage. We have a 50,000 square foot facility, and right now we have about 63 people, but we could probably double that before we had to even think about acquiring someone else or I want to give it my best shot before I bring in any private equity as well. So, from a numbers perspective, I'd like to do about 6% growth each year, and then just see how that plays out. So, but really, what I want to do is just build the best company I can, not just for my customers, but for my employees. Because uh, one of the things my grandfather, who started the company, had always shown me was that it's about how you treat your people. And it didn't matter if we were, meeting somebody that was an owner of another company, or if we were at a restaurant and someone was serving us a meal, he would treat that person with the same amount of respect. And so I've always understood that it's our greatest resource is our people. So
Mhm.
so that's really what my goal is to create the best company I can for the people that we have, because I don't want them just to have a job here. I want them to have careers. When somebody drives in with a new truck, in the parking lot, it makes me feel good, because I know that they're doing good and their family is doing good, and that's important to me.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. That's awesome. You reminded me of a chart that we referred to, and I love it because it's so simple, but you're speaking to it right now. It's like I call it the circle of success. It starts up here with with the owner, and the circle goes this way. Actually, it goes the other way as I'm describing it, but I can only explain it this way as I see it. The owner takes care of the team takes care of the customer takes care of the business, and the business takes care of the owner. And the one thing you'll notice is there's no line between owner and customer. All of the business owners' focus is on developing the team, just like you
I like that.
described it. And the team's responsibility is to, deliver top-notch service to the customer. And then, the circle just goes around. So, and it's not. mm, when you're in the fray and you're working the day to day, and to your point earlier about working too much in the business, you can't see those things. But
Mhm.
once you start stepping out, you can start seeing them and they start making sense. So, congratulations to you on, picking that as a goal. That's fantastic. So, 6% growth per year. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's achievable though. I
Yeah,
would,
I think so.
yeah.
I
Uh,
think so. It's one of those smart goals, that we want it to be. a bit of a stretch, but also achievable. But 1 year at a time, it's kind of funny to me when people talk about 5 and 10 year goals, and it's like, I'm just trying to get through this year right now.
Yeah, gotcha. So food and beverage is your one of your focus industries. What types of services do you do in food and beverage?
Yeah, so General Mills is one of our biggest clients. So for them, we provide everyday maintenance. We have embedded contractors that show up to work at General Mills. We have about 8 guys there. That support their maintenance crew. Their maintenance crew obviously knows their business very well, but they're not welders per se or fabricators. So we're there to support them in that way. We also do a lot of equipment setting.
Mhm.
So we if for example, if they'll say, hey, this toaster strudel line is antiquated, we're going to bring in new equipment. So we would demo that old line, then they would bring in new equipment, we'd offload it, set it in place. Then they would say, well, we have this machine and this machine, we need a way to get the product from point A to B. We would design, fabricate, and install a conveyor. And then they might, but then the product's falling out of this machine, so we need some bins or some hoppers to collect it. Then there's some areas where there's some safety involved, so we need more guarding so people don't get their fingers stuck in this. We would fabricate that guarding, and then they say, well, now we need access to the top of the equipment, so we would build stairs and maybe a catwalk over top of it. So it's really just all custom work that we would provide. We do air handling systems as well, and dust collection and pneumatics, and really just any kind of material handling systems is really what we specialize in. But we also work in the automotive industry. We've done a lot of work for Bridgestone over the years. We do pet food is also big for us. We're in the Royal Canin plant in Lebanon.
Hmm.
Been there for many, many years. And we do a little bit in plastics, which is advanced composites. If anybody drives down 65s and see those tall silos over to the right behind near the Cracker Barrel, those are big plastic silos, or they hold lots of plastic. But so we really are in. We worked at Nearstar, which is a mining facility up in near Clarksville. So we dabble in quite a bit of industry, but definitely food and beverage is our niche, simply because we deal with a lot of stainless and which is sanitary type grade fabrication. So the welds have to be very particular and very clean, and the material itself has to be treated in such a way that it will not create gaps and holes and different things for bacteria. So when you see like E. coli breakouts and stuff like that, I mean, that in a way that's good for business, because for us, because then people need us to come in and design a better system to eliminate that kind of risk.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, great. So it's a very heavily manufacturing focused, right? I mean, you're right there
Yeah,
in most of it.
yeah, very
Um,
much manufacturing and custom fab.
yeah, and material handling. So stainless steel, that's it's kind of expensive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it more difficult to work with and manage?
No,
No?
mild steel, we do a lot of work with mild steel as well. I wouldn't say either metal is more difficult. Now we do a lot of aluminum, and that is definitely tougher to weld and tougher to deal with. But we do deal in specialty metals as well, like Inconel and some AR plate for that's different heat and abrasion issues that we have at different plants as well. So we even deal with copper. We make these funnels for Hagenese, which is a plant off of 109 in Gallatin. It's really a day to day. You just never know what the customer is going to ask for. But if it's metal, most of the time we can do it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, let me change gears a little bit. I'm going to hit some standard questions here, especially since you've been in the role for, I don't know, a relatively short period of time. Over that time, what's the biggest learning you've had? What would you attribute? What's the biggest surprise to you? What's the biggest learning?
Certainly patience. I mean, I'm not a patient person, and I expect people to buy into my ideas immediately, and that's just not realistic. People are resistant to change. And I know that you have to meet people where they're at. And sometimes you have to slow down and listen to them, even though you don't necessarily want to. So that's kind of been what I've had to do. I've had to humble myself a bit and take the time to let everybody speak, so that way there's more buy-in in the end. And I think that's not a lesson I didn't know. I just am learning it over and over again,
Mhm.
uh, because um, I've worked with many of these people for many years. But I'll tell you, you have to get some wins. You have to get quite a few wins before people will just start following you blindly. And
Mhm.
I don't think I've gotten those wins yet on some of these old timers, I would say, that are here, who are more experienced and influential people here as well. And so that has been my biggest learning experience, is to slow down, listen to the people that have influence, who may not be in the most leadership role, but yet still have influence, and make sure that you hear them out to get buy-in before you move forward.
Mhm. Would you say that patience is your biggest weakness?
Yes, yes. So um, if anybody does any reading about emotional intelligence, there's I can't remember how many characteristics, maybe a dozen or so, but my weakness is impulse control. And when I have an idea, I'm ready to run with it. Um, and and I know that that's not always the best. So how I deal with my weakness is I let everybody around me know what my weakness is, and I say to them, "Hey, I get going too fast on things. So when I tell you to do something or I have an idea, I don't want you just to blindly say, oh, okay, I'll go do that. Or, hey, that's a great idea. I want you to think about it. And if you have any disagreements or any reason why we should slow down a little bit, I need to hear it." And so I've really empowered the people around me to slow me down.
Mhm.
And has been a huge help, because I am who I am. I will never overcome this control, but I know that if I empower the people around me to recognize when I'm acting that way, then I that creates those guardrails that I need, to make sure that my ideas are successful.
Mhm.
Because it's not that I'm going to change the premise of my idea, but maybe it needs tweaking a bit. Maybe there's something that I've missed, that I haven't thought through. And so that's what I really look for the people around me to do, is to say, hold on, have you thought about this? And have you thought about this? And what happens in this scenario?
Mhm.
And that has been the biggest help for me.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can imagine. Yeah, opening up. And the thing about that is you get better ideas a lot of the time, if you listen to someone else's perspective, because they're coming at it, obviously, like we were talking about before, with their own experiences, their own perspective.
that's
Uh,
right.
but you know what? It's at times you have to like be careful. And you don't want people to necessarily challenge your leadership or step on outside of their bounds, but um, sharing ideas is one thing, but then trying to, I don't know, take things a different direction. Do you ever experience any of that with your openness?
Yes, absolutely. I do, and sometimes I've been to that. It really just depends on what it is. If it's something internal, we like a form or a quick email or something like that, I may move fast. But then if it's a company wide initiative, then I really do slow down a little bit, or I listen to other people and try to understand what I've missed, because
Mhm.
I don't know what I don't know. But you're right. Like, when I do empower my employees, I tell them that they can tell me that they disagree with me, but they need to do it in a respectful way,
Mhm.
just the same as I've treated them with respect. So there's a very good understanding that people have around here, that allows us that safety, to where they can disagree with me and know that I'm not going to blow up on them. But if I feel strongly about something, I don't have a problem with overriding and moving forward with my idea.
Hmm. Right. Share with us what the biggest challenge has been for you. What's the hardest thing you've had to work through, the hardest thing you've had to take the team through, or what your biggest challenge has been over the last or during your time?
That would be a personal issue that I had. My first daughter was diagnosed with cancer in 2016, and then she relapsed. She was in remission and then relapsed in 2018. And so during that time, as operations, I just made the decision that we would move into commercial work, which was a total disaster and required tons of micromanagement. And so I was trying to manage these commercial projects that I knew very little about because we were an industrial contractor. And I was living at Vanderbilt. And that was definitely the hardest time of my life. And also the team here was not interested in doing commercial work. So most of the most experienced people did not want to touch it. And so I was dealing with a less experienced crew trying to tackle commercial work that we had not done before, all while my daughter was fighting for her life. And so that was without a doubt the hardest time of my life. Um, the good news is my daughter is doing great now. She's in fourth grade and playing basketball, and she's 10 years old, and you never know that she went through what she did. But no matter what's going on in your personal life, the world keeps moving.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, you got when you have a stressful personal life on top of a stressful business life, it makes it very challenging.
It was definitely a double whammy at the time, but made it through both of those experiences and learned a lot of lessons through that. And we're came out on the other side better for it.
Yeah, awesome. Congratulations on that. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
What'd you learn? Tell me what you learned about dipping your toe in the commercial space and deciding now. And I assume you're not doing commercial work anymore. Is that right?
No, we're not. What I learned from people are always like, think outside the box and, get out of your comfort zone. And I think there's some truth to that, but we dove in head first outside the box. And I wish we had tiptoed in. Uh, and so I think that we just bit off way more than we could chew to begin with before we knew it was too late. And those contracts are really long contracts. So the last contract we did was 1,200 broad, and that's a year-long contract, and we were 6 months in, and we were out of money. So that was that. The lesson there was, get out of your comfort zone, think outside the box. But when you do that, make sure you're limiting your exposure, because we just had the arrogance that that it's metal fabrication. We do metal fabrication. It's install. We do install. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
But that was not the case. It's a entirely different industry, and one that we were not successful in. And so we learned to stay in our wheelhouse, which is manufacturing.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And it is, those are hard lessons to learn, but hopefully it wasn't too expensive for you. Uh, but you have to, it's almost like if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have known that you shouldn't have done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I learned a lot through that experience. And I learned a lot about contracts, and so it's definitely made me more aware. So it's, again, I think I try to be positive and take the best from any experience, bad and good. And so I'm certainly glad we're through that, but I definitely learned a lot from it.
Mm. Yeah. So, Derek, I appreciate you spending some time with us today and opening up and telling us a lot about Wolfe Industrial, and your journey here. You've kind of shared with us a lot of insight too. you getting a lot of outside perspective, and you quoted Nick Saban there. He's one of my favorites. Of course, it's not fair because I'm an Alabama football fan, but I do. I'm so entertained by what you can learn from him just to listen to him talk. Do you have a favorite go-to or someone who's been a lot of? And you mentioned Greg, you're someone you've been working with previously, but is there someone like John Wooden or John Maxwell or anybody like that that you
You
turn
just
to?
started John Maxwell. I haven't read one of John's books in a long time, but when I first started my curiosity into leadership, I read, I don't know, half a dozen of John's books, and that that laid the foundation for my leadership skills and what I understood of what leadership is. And there was one book, it's the 5 levels of leadership, that I really enjoyed, and I think it was level 4 is leaders who train other leaders.
Hmm.
And to me, I was like, wow, that's the pinnacle. That's where I want to get. It's one thing to be a great leader yourself, but can you create good leaders? That's the next level, and that's something that I strive to do. And so, I invest in my people here, and I'm always encouraging them. I've paid for executive coaching for some of them. John Maxwell is definitely somebody that I respect, and Simon Sinek, I
Oh
also
yeah.
really enjoy his teachings. A little bit of Jocko. I'm a Jocko fan as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm always open, and personal growth is important to me. And I'm also part of a Vistage group, which is like a
Mhm.
consulting group, and that's been very beneficial as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So you mentioned there about being a good leader and making other leaders. Been reading a book by John Wooden. You remember
Hmm.
basketball coach at
Basketball
UCLA?
coach.
Yeah. He had a quote. He said, "Good leaders never stop learning. Great leaders never stop teaching."
Hmm.
And I thought that's awesome. That's exactly right. And it echoes a lot about what you were saying there. So. Um, but Derek, again, I do appreciate your time. I appreciate you being a guest on the podcast. And I look forward to, hopefully interacting and engaging with you again here soon.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, Craig. This was great. Thanks a lot for having me.
Hey, you're more than welcome. Take care.